I would like to introduce the panel members. What I'm going to do is kind of skip down the line and tell you just a little bit, and then I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves. On the left is Brad Patrick. He is the former legal counsel for Wikipedia. He was very early on in the company there. So as you know, Wikipedia is an online encyclopedia, which is curated by the people in the audience who read it. Very interesting product. Mike Potts runs a software development company up in Jacksonville. And Sarah and I came across Mike, his company actually runs a software engineering conference and a bunch of different community events that happen up in the Jacksonville area. And they've apparently fled the OneSpark event that's happening in Jacksonville, which is drawing a huge amount of people up there. So Mike has talked about ethics in technology and software development in the past, and what he's got to say is very, very interesting too. Next is Rich Arter. I've known Rich the longest of everybody here. I used to work with Rich at a local manufacturing company, and Rich was the investor relations and project management. And I tell you what, as a team builder and a guy who really looks at doing the right thing, Rich really puts a point on that. It's absolutely amazing the fun that we've had doing projects in the past. And finally, Alan Weiss. What Sarah says about Alan is, when you talk to Alan, it's like talking to Jules Verne.
I'm old.
He has seen things that nobody else has seen. So Alan is credited by Forbes magazine with having built the backbone of the internet. It wasn't the other Al, the one who often takes and gets the credit for it. So with that, I'm gonna turn it back to Brad, and I want each of the panelists to introduce themselves and to give me something that has impacted them in their life having to do with ethics.
Good morning. My name is Brad Patrick. I'm an attorney practicing up in Tampa, Florida. And almost coming up right on 10 years ago, I found myself trying to reach out to this guy named Jimmy Wales, who's the fellow who runs Wikipedia. And within several months, I ended up becoming its interim executive director and its first general counsel. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was an amazing experience. And through that experience, I had a chance to meet Sarah and Stan. I gave a TED Talk down here a number of years ago, and had a really great experience with the complexity of what it means to interact internationally around something as simple as information, an encyclopedia for a nonprofit. You wouldn't believe how complex things get. The ethical issue that I wanted to draw attention to, something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, or rather a new beginning now. One of the things that Wikipedia prides itself on is having a global network of contributors. People all over the world can contribute to the encyclopedia in any language they choose. They have the choice to sign up with us and provide a username, or they can contribute anonymously, either using a username or just an IP address. IP addresses are fraught, technically. That's a whole separate conversation. But it was really important to someone in Thailand. And the reason is that, unlike here, if I say something negative about a president, I do not expect to get a knock at the door. But this fellow in Thailand, who was doing a lot of work to try to keep the current events that were unfolding around the Thai royalty with its fraught political situation up to date with references to be able to provide real information about what was happening inside the country in real time. It was a real danger that if he were found out to be known by a name with a real person on the ground in Thailand, that he would get a knock at the door. And because of that, the idea that we would protect with every technical means at our disposal to try to prevent people from being able to externally discern who a particular contributor was, that was the thing. Fast forward 10 years, the Wikimedia Foundation has sued the NSA to have the NSA, to have the United States government stop monitoring all of your traffic and how you communicate with Wikipedia. So It's important stuff.
My name is Mike Potts. I'm the CEO, co-founder of a software engineering firm called Feature 23 out of Jacksonville, Florida. We're going into our 8th year, and my first brush with ethics came as a lead software engineer for Arthur Andersen here in Sarasota about 15 years ago. And as you can imagine, as a software engineer, in the aftermath of things that I didn't quite understand at the time, I began doing some research on the topic. How could I have protected myself? What does this mean for me? Email was a large contributing factor to that case, and I didn't understand that. I thought that email was a communication, much like a conversation. So as a software engineer, I came across some research published by a gentleman named James Moore of Dartmouth. What is Computer Ethics was the title of that paper. And in the paper, he talked about two things that computers were going to change forever in society, and the first was logical malleability, the fact that the computer was malleable in just about every capacity, meaning it did what it was told. There were no checks, no balances. A computer simply does what it's told. Yet we give it a persona. We sometimes pretend, very Jarvis-like, HAL 9000, that they have a living, prescience that they don't actually have. The other thing he talked about was this thing he called invisible abuse. Because software is compiled, other than the engineer, most people don't understand what happens inside of a computer. That doesn't mean that the computer isn't doing something. And so now as a software engineer, I find myself at the keyboard compiling the source code that most people will never see. When you add that to the ramifications of decisions made at a company like Arthur Andersen, I realized that software engineers had on their shoulders, a single engineer could bring an entire organization down. Good or evil, it really depended on the person. So how do you teach right and wrong? How do you teach software engineers? Fast forward Feature 23. I'm in the business of software engineering today. I work with CIOs, much in the fashion that Jim was talking about. And we're trying to hire and train young software engineers. I can teach them to code, I can teach them to compile, I can even teach them to speak like a human being and not like a computer when in the room with other intelligent people. But what I can't teach them to do is to make decisions that are right and wrong in the context of ethics. Because there is no such thing in a computer world. And if you haven't noticed, your younger generation, the more time they spend with computers, the less English they seem to understand. So we have this really fuzzy line on what's right and wrong with the newer software engineers.
Good morning. My name is Rich Arter. I retired from Sun Hydraulics Corporation in 2013, I think the end of the year. And it's a manufacturing firm right down the street down in Sarasota. It's an interesting place in that it really doesn't have any hierarchy whatsoever. So it's a place with an incredibly strong value foundation that enables all its members, which now number 900 around the world, to attempt to make the best decisions they can in any context. I've been curious about ethics and morality my whole life. I have an undergrad in philosophy. And a couple of years ago, I went to the University of Notre Dame to get an MBA, solely because their focus was on leadership and ethics. And quite frankly, I found the examination of ethics to be far less robust than I thought it should be. And it's, I think as the previous two people said, this is a fuzzy world. This isn't black and white and right or wrong. These are tough decisions. So you get into these areas where you just can't go to something and look up what the answer should be. And when the gentleman Fidel was speaking, this is exactly what I was thinking about, as he was talking about these systems in the four quadrants of complexity and simplicity and chaos. And at Sun we had a saying, and the saying was, do the right things for the right reasons. And I've passed that on to a lot of people, and they'll say, well, what are the right reasons? Figure it out, you know? And the other thing I'd like to say is, a quote came to mind. I'm talking about Snowden, and it's Ben Franklin. And Ben Franklin said, for those who would give up a little freedom for a little security, they deserve neither. And that quote is always kind of stuck with me. So I don't really have an agenda or something to say. I'm just kind of having fun talking with these guys.
My name is Alan Weiss, and I'm a has-been. I used to do a lot of things, and now I'm retired. I used to work for IBM for 30 years. I ran their large systems group. I produced all their supercomputers. I got them into parallelism, and I retired after 30 years. And I started a little company called Advanced Network and Services. You've heard of Gore? And he invented the internet? No, he didn't. He funded the internet. And I bid with NSF, and I won the bid because of the deep pockets of my supporters, IBM, MCI, and Merrick, and Northern Telecom. And we built the backbone of the internet.
And that was a not-for-profit, wasn't it? that you-
Yes, it was a not-for-profit because I didn't want any shareholders. I wanted to run it like a candy store. And if you have a for-profit, you have people that can close you down or take you in a direction you don't want to go in. So that's why I created it as a for-profit. A not-for-profit. We had a for-profit subsidiary, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I created the backbone of the internet, sold connections to all the universities in the United States, all the government agencies in the United States, and took the internet commercial. And it was the largest and fastest by 28 times part of the internet. I was a security. We had the first security on the internet. There is no privacy on the internet. There is no security on the internet. Anyone who tells you that doesn't know what they're saying. Unless you put your power source and your computer inside a Faraday cage, a double Faraday cage, you have, if you put it in a double Faraday cage, you have some privacy and security. But there is no privacy.
We think it's great that people are learning to code, but we do think that the profession needs to help them understand that now that you understand Ruby or Java or PHP to some extent, you begin on Friday. That doesn't mean by Monday that you can go out and charge $175 an hour and convince some business to risk their business's future on a weekend crash course in computer programming. From our perspective, there's a great deal of theory. Programming is one of 14 critical skills as a software engineer. When you pair that with the fact that universities have a regulated curriculum, they're really not diving deep into the examination of ethics, applied ethics. We're fortunate if engineers have even heard of the concept, much less a deep dive in computer ethics, the responsibilities of owning somebody else's source code. And source code, by the way, is one of those things that can be copied quickly. It's if you're using certain tools, they even have a philosophy built in that every developer has a copy of the IP. Well, that's a very interesting dilemma when something that's ethereal or vaporware now physically has a presence on 60 computers, say, in the company. How do you control, as a software engineer, the the safety of those assets. The number of laptops that get lifted from airports, that disappear or taken from coffee shops. These are all things that we don't seem to talk about until they happen, and then what do? We fire the software engineer who wasn't trained, that didn't understand this was even a thing. So we focused on those two areas within what we'll call professional ethics in the software space, the education of the executive. Some of these are Wharton graduates, they're very smart people, but what they're not teaching at Wharton is deep dives in computer ethics. They're teaching them business theory, business model theory. So that's been a large focus for us, and I have to say that that's kept us fairly busy, because where are the rules? There are no rule systems for the executives. In many cases, it has to do with the context of the business. If you're, in healthcare, life-saving equipment, different set of ethics than if we've got an e-commerce shop, which, by the way, if you're in e-commerce, those rules are changing almost monthly at this point. And then to the litigation side of it, in the states of North Carolina and Texas, they've actually passed legislation that allows them to pursue criminal liability against firms like mine if they do, in fact, create a piece of software which is violated. So think Target, think Delta, think Blue Cross. In those cases, had my firm written that software, they could have come after me and my partners criminally. I could actually go to prison for that. Well, that's not something I would want. So, our not going to prison is now dependent on the college graduates that we just hired that don't understand ethics and are probably 8 years away from being able to have a conversation. And I challenge anybody in this room, if you want to have a very interesting experience, in your next business meeting, simply say the words. Don't accuse anybody, but simply say the words. I'm not sure that's an ethical approach. Your relationship with your colleagues will change forever. And there's something about the word ethics that really, really, really scares people. So it's one of those things that you can't really get a fair examination of, because nobody really knows what it means.
Wow, excellent. Very thought-provoking. Rich.
Yeah.
Doing the right thing.
Yeah.
What? Now, I've never known Rich to have no words. So he did, as he said, study philosophy, and he had some really interesting experiences, I think, going to South America as part of his program with Notre Dame, and he's currently writing a book which covers a lot of very interesting ground in his background as well. Go ahead, Rich.
I think everything we're talking about, these issues.
Speak into the mic. There you go.
I gotta be closer. These issues have been around forever. So how do you behave in an ethical manner? But in this connected world, as Al talked about, there's never been any security in this world, and there likely never will be. Then as you add things like this concept of artificial intelligence, which I've always been a science fiction geek. I guess the idea of that, at least for me, I'm not an expert in technology, but it's that you start to mimic how an individual thinks, how our minds work. And other than that, it's just algorithms, isn't it? It's just decision trees and boom. But what the human mind can do when you come to juncture, go this way or that way, and you say, well, geez, neither one is really crystal clear. That's where the human mind thinks about it different. Mike talked about context, he used the word context. So, moral relativism, that phrase has been around for a long time. I really don't much care for it. I don't know. To me, the technologists of the world today, and I don't say this disparagingly or any, it's just an interesting analogy, they're like the priests of yesterday. So, if you're a non-technologist kind of person, and you're operating in this world of technology in a company, and it's telling the systems are telling you this, they're telling you that. If you don't understand, you have to go to this group of people and say, "Oh, it's not doing what I thought it should do," or it's something funny is happening. And so these people have this enormous responsibility, power, if you will, and it creates a kind of new power asymmetry. And one of the things we could say is anytime you hit a power asymmetry, bad things happen. So we have a new power asymmetry forming. I don't know what the answers are, but again, I would say the problem is the same as it's always been. How do you, to the best of your ability, make the right decisions for the right reasons? And you're going to make mistakes. You just hope they're not big mistakes. I remember when my daughter went to school as a freshman. She went to Elon University in North Carolina, and they separated the parents from the students. And they took the parents in a room and they said, you know, your kids are going to make mistakes. You know, your kids are going to make big mistakes. Just hope they're not catastrophic mistakes. And this is in spades today because every keystroke you make just is captured. You know, if the NSA used to capture the phone conversations, now it's like, well, now they're capturing every nuanced sentence, word, grammar, explanation point, whatever. And so, and then with that, I mean, I think we've seen the things you could do. It's frightening. But again, I have to go back to the challenges. How do you instill a moral, ethical framework in the body humanity? And it's clearly going to be different if you grow up in China than if you grow up in the United States or if you grow up in Thailand. You know, if you're in Thailand, and you know, Brad, I mean, one of the things that the idea came to mind. I'm on Wikipedia all the time. I ask a question and I go there, and it strikes me maybe one of the guiding principles you guys are after is, use the word loosely, truth or factual verification, factual accuracy, so that you kind of triangulate this thing and make sure that not one. I don't need a microphone stand. You ought to know by now.
We're recording that.
Excuse me. That it's really important to get it right, to put it out there in front of the people. So the new skills that young people need are discernment. And they're not being taught. Critical thinking. How do I look at all this stuff that's showing up in front of me on this screen and determine what is relevant, what's meaningful, what's accurate? And again, I just have tons of questions. I don't have any answers, so that's all I have to say.
It's like big data for people. You know, it's like it's all coming at us.
It's frightening.
It's absolutely amazing.
I do want to say that to me is the thing that I appreciate. I didn't used to appreciate the word curation. And we hear it now and think about it. But I mean, a long time ago, curation meant something different, I think, than it is today. But that's the skill. I mean, if I know that I can have my kids be able to differentiate between this and this and this and select the best of this and this and this and explain why and defend it and be able to, translate it to someone else, you win. I mean, that's what you have to be able to do in this environment.
Yes, exactly.
This brings us to Alan. Alan has some very interesting thoughts about net neutrality.
Stand up if you know what network neutrality is.
Me.
Oh,
They raise their hands and stand.
stand up if you know what the internet is.
You've been sitting for a long time.
This is the interactive part.
If I have to talk about network neutrality, I have to give you a premier on the internet first. The internet is a connection of independent networks. That's one, that's another, and they used to connect this way. Right now, they connect at a connection point, and the connection points are interconnected. Or it's a combination thereof, but they're all independent networks. Verizon's network is independent of Comcast's network, which is independent of whatever. And there are thousands of, hundreds of thousands of networks in the world. And network neutrality is pricing, a combination of pricing on the network, and it's political, and it's religious. And I say it's religious because once you get it in your head that this is the right way to do it, you can't be swayed.
So true.
25 years ago, I got into the internet, and I built the largest and fastest part of the internet. And then we started to go into Europe and Asia and whatever. We had more than $500 million investment. And how are we going to recover that investment? We had to price a connection. This company wanted to connect to our network. And how much would this connection cost? So we had to recover our investment. So we sat in a room with spreadsheets and made up prices. And we either got it right or wrong. If we priced too high, our competitors undercut us. If we priced too low, we lost money. But our investment made, and our speed made applications that were not created yet. It gave a space for those applications to be created. Things that weren't there in 1990 were there in 95 when we left. And then network neutrality was born. I mean, we charged in the back room like a car. You got a Ferrari? We charge more. You got a Volkswagen? We charge less. You got a cashmere sweater? We charge more. You got a wool sweater? We charge less. And so why not charge more for a high-speed connection with low latency and higher volume? And we had hundreds of different price points for one connection to our network. you, you could resell our capacity. And we charge more for commercial bits than we did for university bits. We charge more for low latency. That's the time it takes to get from here to there and back. And that's important in stock transactions. And there have been specials on 60 Minutes about that. Yeah. So we charge more for low latency, high speed, and many other factors. So what's new today? Between 2005 and 2012, there were 5 attempts to pass bills in Congress on network neutrality, prohibiting quality of service. Those are the things that we did. Low latency, high speed, prohibiting. Why would people invest in a network if they were prohibited from charging for their investment? I don't know. In March this year, the FCC passed rules prohibiting blocking, and we used to block, throttling, and paid prioritization. All the things that we used to do. It's crazy. I mean, why would anyone invest in a network to push technology to the next level if they can't charge for the services? These are reflections of the investments made. In many industries, premium users drive improvements to the infrastructure, underlying technology, and raise the standards of service for all. To stop the innovator that moves society ahead, capping what that they can charge for services is wrong. I've watched the internet for 30 years, and it's self-healing. Competitors, the weak competitors die, the strong competitors live, and the internet is not sick. So why fix a problem that doesn't exist? And the internet is worldwide, made up of hundreds of thousands of networks. If the US has network neutrality, what happens in the rest of the world? Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, ask a question.
Is it getting to the point where people view the internet like a road? So it is now shifted into simply the public good and open to everybody? I mean, is this the perception kind of driving some of these ideas of net neutrality?
I think the current FCC guy has common carrier facilities confused with the internet.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of the point I'm making. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Alan, as one of your experiences, you got called a particular name and you got dragged in front of a powerful group of people. Tell us just very briefly, what did they call you and what happened?
Because we were charging variable rates to recover our investment, our competitors, AT&T, the Bell companies, PSI, UUNet, our competitors, some of them really large, dragged us into Congress. And I was called Darth Vader.
Nice.
And we had a congressional inquiry, NSF Inspector General looking through our books to see where the money went. And it slowed us down for a year. If I was one of my competitors, I would have done the same. Because we were really, really powerful. And it gets to integrity. If we hadn't had integrity, we could have done a lot. We knew where every packet was coming from, where every packet was going to. And we would help the government only if they had a warrant. And they never produced a warrant, so we never helped them. So we were in a really good place. Every packet in the internet flowed through our network for 5 years in a row. If a packet left Germany going for China or going to France, it had to go through our network first because we built our own routers. So we had the only routers large enough to hold all the routes. So if a guy in Germany wanted to talk to a guy next door, it came to the US, went through our network, got the route, and went back next door. So we were in a position that could really have been abused.
And you resisted. You didn't let that happen.
We coined the phrase bulletproof integrity.
There you go.
Awesome. Awesome.
And early in life, you develop those traits.
Yes, sir.
And we hope you never forget them.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.